Hello adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. You might notice in the background there are a few graves. We are actually at a very interesting site looking for a very famous man from the Abilene, Kansas area. Now originally he started out as a New York policeman, but he left the force and ended up doing a few interesting things, which we'll talk about in just a few moments. However, in a time whenever they were said to have lots of lawlessness in the area, they decided that they did not want to have guns, and he was said to reign with an iron fist. So we're going to step back into Western history as a part of the Western Boot Trail today. This is a trail that tells you many of the stories of people here in the Abilene area who crossed through, including some of the big names in Western history. After we leave here, we're going to go right across the road over to the middle school where you can see one of the many murals that they have in town. Now this is something that is available if you look it up, just the Western Boot Trail, Abilene, Kansas. I encourage you to do this, but for now, let's go and find our infamous man. Now, June 4th, 1870 is whenever he first started to work through the problems that Abilene was having with violence. He passed a city ordinance saying there would be no more firearms allowed and started to quickly enforce this. And it was not super popular amongst those who like to have their weapons, obviously. However, there was such crime and violence here that something had to change, and so this was the best way to do it. And he reigned with an iron fist, I mentioned before, and that's because he wasn't afraid of a good old fist fight. In fact, he thought that any confrontation could be solved through just duking it out as opposed to shooting. That's something we could probably go with today in today's society also. There's a lot of violence that happens in today's world, and he seemed to be onto something because through this action, it seemed to change the way that Abilene functioned in a more positive way. Now, the one problem was that in his enforcement, sometimes he would leave his own jurisdiction to go and find horse thieves, which was the case on a particular incident where he went 12 miles outside of the town in order to recover some of the stolen cattle, which was the case whenever he left town and went 12 miles outside of Abilene to go and attend to some business in regards to some people who had stolen some livestock. This did not end well. He ended up actually getting shot outside of town where the ordinance did not apply. The suspects were Andrew McConnell and Moses Mild, and after they shot him, he fired back before they came up to him with an axe and finished the job. Now, he was a very well-known person in the community and in Kansas in general. He had done a lot of good, positive things to start the work toward moving away from the violence, only to end in a very, very violent way. But he is memorialized here in Abilene with a very unique stone. He's a very fascinating character, and also his background with police enforcement in New York is something kind of interesting. A lot of people who came to the Western push did not have necessarily the credentials that he did. He had been enforcement before, and because of that, he had a very unique perspective on the law. And he also was said to be a kind person who treated people fairly in the community. And I think that that was pretty interesting as well. As we kind of move around this particular cemetery, you'll notice that it is a beautifully landscaped cemetery. There are lots of people here. The community is very close-knit. There are tons of flags and memorials throughout as people honor their fallen loved ones. And overall, this is an interesting piece of history, not only for Kansas, but for the West. I think that it is fascinating to find things like this that we can share so we can see how there are similarities and correlations to what we currently experience and then also what might have been experienced in the past, which is why we come out to these locations. So with that said, let's go walk over and find the gravestone. We're going over here. This is lot 9, block 18, space 6, and I believe that is it right there. In fact, this is it. Thomas J. Smith, Marshal of Abilene, 1870, died a martyr to duty, November 2nd, 1870, a fearless hero of the frontier days who in cowboy chaos established the supremacy of law. It's a unique stone to say the least. It's very different than anything around here. And the inscription itself is very telling of who this man was in regards to the community itself. Okay, so now we've come across the road to check out another piece of the Cowboy Trail. And this is fascinating. They have tons of murals around town. They also have a museum that has a bronze bust of a famous cowboy. It's pretty interesting. There are tons of stops in town for this. We're just doing a few of them here so that I can leave some of these for you, because I know that seeing them in person is so much bigger of a deal than just like seeing them on the internet sometimes. I'm showing you a few though to give you kind of a little bit of a taste of the history that you can find here. Abilene is surrounded with so much rich history, and so I think that you'll enjoy this one. But this is at the middle school. Don't come here while they're in school session. I'm here on a weekend so that we can actually see this up close and personal. So one of the things that I enjoy about coming through these areas is that you can learn a little bit more about the history of the region in general. I noticed that parts of the Chisholm Trail would come up into this area, and we've stopped off at many places in both Texas and Oklahoma that have talked about the Chisholm Trail. So as you're traveling, you can find pieces that connect to other places and pieces of stories. For example, the man that we just learned about, he was here during a time that some of the most famous outlaws would come through this region. And we've learned about those outlaws in all sorts of places. Despite the fact that they were on horseback, they would make some good timing to go to lots of different places. We learned that some of those outlaws that would pass through here would make it down to Fort Smith, where some of them ended up getting caught. We have learned that through Oklahoma, some of them would hide out in some of the rocky areas to make sure that they weren't caught if they'd done something bad. They even made it over to New Mexico and Arizona, and it's just wild to see how those stories kind of play out. And it makes you kind of think, okay, did this guy who was reigning with the iron fist, who didn't want guns in town, did he have any interactions with those people? Probably. He probably was here at the time when those very people were coming through this region doing all sorts of nefarious things. And that's what makes history cool. Not only can you see it in a book or read it at a museum, you can physically come to the places that are now fully developed. They have all sorts of other news stories, but you can look back and find the little pieces of each and every one of those old stories and put them together like a big puzzle. And by seeing the things that we just saw, for example, with this large mural, you can see the cattle that are moving through this area, and you can use those context clues to realize, oh, the reason why they have painted this is because of these trails that would move the cattle from place to place, so ultimately they could put them on trains and ship them off to do whatever. Now, of course, whenever we went over to Dodge City, Kansas, we learned a lot of things about those particular subjects: the good, the bad, the ugly, the businesses that would come about after, and the businesses that would be created as a result of the cattle industry coming through here. And it's fascinating to see how over here in Abilene, which is quite a distance away, you see some of those similar stories, because this was also a transport hub area. People needed to be able to live, thrive, and survive in these areas also. So I just wanted to share these couple little stops with you because I think that things like this are awesome. Now, Abilene has a lot of modern amenities, a lot of really cool, more modern history as well. So this is a good one to stop in. And in fact, on the next video, we're probably going to dive into some more of the more recent modern history of this area. But for now, remember, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time. Loved getting these brain wrinkles with you guys. I hope that you'll stop into Abilene. And if you have already been here, tell me what stops you made. I'd really like to know. Until next time, bye.